what's going on between Iran and the United States. On one side, you see basically what we've heard from the American ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, said that Donald Trump has decided not to attack Iran, not to bomb Iran, but bankrupt Iran, which followed by what the comments on the part of Scott Bessent talking about the next week going to be the maximum pressure on Iranian economy. And this is one side of story. The other one part is what we've heard from Israeli media. Channel 12 said that the head of CENTCOM was talking with Israelis, saying that we're going to attack Iran. He's trying to convince the Trump administration, Donald Trump, to attack Iran and to force them into negotiations. And the other point was what was reported on Jerusalem Post, that Israeli officials, IDF and Mossad, they were stunned by Iran's rapid military recovery after the 40-day war. And what is your assessment of what's going on, what we're witnessing right now?
Well, ironically, both Iran and the United States have adopted a strategy of economic attrition, putting economic pressure on each other in the hope that one or the other side will capitulate. I think Iran holds the cards in this battle. Even though Iran's economy is badly battered, people are deprived of many things in Iran. Actually, it's not quite as bad as people imagine. I think the Iranian currency has actually appreciated recently, gone up a bit, which suggests that the economy is not as bad as people suggest. But Iran is there in the Persian Gulf, on the Strait of Hormuz. It doesn't have to send ships halfway around the world. The United States is having a lot of difficulty sustaining its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. We're now seeing reports. I mean, you and I talked about before the wear and tear on equipment and personnel aboard those ships. It's now out in the open that there have been quite a few attempts by sailors to commit suicide. They're so depressed down by the situation. They've been at sea for 7 months, which is a very long time. And I don't think, there's now a lot of criticism of Secretary of Defense, so Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, by members of Congress, because they're responding to the complaints of families about the conditions aboard ships. And he's just said, well, we can sustain the blockade for forever, indefinitely. But that's not true. And no one who knows anything about naval logistics agrees with him. So I think in this context, Brad Cooper, the CENTCOM commander, is doing two things. One, he's arguing sensibly that the United States can't win an economic war with Iran on the terms that Washington is suggesting. And second, he's behaving like the regional commander he is, without regard to the overall military posture globally of the United States. Not his boss, because it's not the chain of command, but the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Kane, is very clear that we can't afford to renew active warfare with Iran. And that's for global reasons. Of course, the Central Command has enough ammunition to do more damage to Iran, but there's no prospect that will bring Iran to capitulate. The business about bringing Iran to the negotiating table is a bit ridiculous, because Iran has said that it will come to the negotiating table if the United States implements the memorandum of understanding, which the United States has violated every provision of, and there's no prospect of that. So I think we're in a situation where the president has decided that he doesn't want headlines about Iran and damage, and he wants a slow squeeze on Iran by economic means. But the consequence of this is going to be higher gas prices, higher oil prices, higher natural gas prices, a general slowing of the world economy, pressure on the American economy, inflation in the United States and elsewhere. And he's going to pay a price in the elections in November. And I think Iran understands that and is prepared to carry on as long as it takes, coin a phrase, as long as it takes to drive the United States out. One final point here, and that is on Sunday, the 60-day memorandum of understanding, so-called ceasefire, expires. Iran is not under any obligation to cease fire. And I think as long as Gulf Arab countries permit American forces to stage activities from their territory, Iran will hit them. It does not require a specific provocation to do so. And in fact, Iran has said that it is going to move from the defensive to the offensive in its approach to the American presence in the region. So I think Donald Trump's effort to keep this war out of the headlines invites Iran to do things that will put it in the headlines. And so I think this is quite a dangerous situation in terms of the prospect of further warfare against countries like Jordan, countries like Kuwait, countries like Bahrain, which have continued to maintain their ties to the American military.
When it comes to the war in Ukraine, we know that the main objectives since the war started were mentioned over and over by the leadership in Russia. What do we know about the main objectives in the ongoing conflict? I'm talking about the main objectives of the Trump administration in the West Asia. What are those objectives? Do we know?
Well, of course, they have varied greatly over this period. It started out, the excuse for the war was doing something about Iran's nuclear program, which intelligence agencies said didn't exist. But anyway, politicians asserted that it did exist. And so they bombed nuclear sites last year, and then again this year, put pressure on Iran on the nuclear front. That quickly gave way to regaining the access to the Strait of Hormuz. And that began first with an opposition to Iran's control, and then, ironically and stupidly, an American blockade, which basically did Iran's work for it, keeping the strait closed and inflicting pain on the world's economies and the United States economy and the US Navy. That has now, then we had Marco Rubio say, well, the objective of the war is to return the situation to where it was before the war, which is an incredible statement. Now we have J.D. Vance saying the purpose of the war is to bring gasoline and oil prices down. So this is, quite a record of vacillation, inconstancy, moving the strategic goalposts in the face of what is obviously a defeat. So there we are. I think now there are people saying, well, there's a Washington Post editorial, which I think is truly stupid, which says, well, now that war has failed, we have to fall back on containment, as though this were somehow, a replica of the Cold War. But for containment to work, you need the cooperation of everybody around the country that you're containing. And the Gulf Arabs have figured out that the United States is not reliable as in defending them. In fact, the presence of the United States gives Iran a reason to attack them. And they're all in the process of quietly trying to make their peace with Iran. I mean, they're angry at Iran for the damage it has done, but they are realists and pragmatists. In the end, they will make peace. They will not join in a containment effort. And, you can see the way things are going with the Pakistani, Saudi, Turkey alliance, or entente, more accurately, I think, a limited partnership for limited purposes. One of the purposes is to signal that they're not going to rely on the United States anymore to sustain the security architecture in the Persian Gulf and West Asia. They will make their own decisions. This entente is aimed at containing Israel. So you talk about containment of Iran. Countries in the region want to contain Israel, which is expanding. And we've just had an announcement from the Minister of Defense, Katz, in Israel, that regardless of what Donald Trump or the United States say, Israel's not going to withdraw from Lebanon. It's going to maintain a permanent presence there. We hear that Israel is dropping white phosphorus on woodlands and forests in Lebanon, burning the environment up, clearing it out, presumably so it can be a free fire zone for Israeli troops who will be there. They're keeping people from returning to their homes in South Lebanon. And Israel is expanding, and everybody in the region is concerned about that. Now the tripartite entente, Pakistani, Saudi, Turkey grouping is not just focused on Israel, it is also focused on Iran. And it's interesting if you think about it, that these are three countries, all of which have either a direct land border or a maritime border with Iran. So this is a replacement for the US in the region, and it needs to be seen as such. Egypt is not part of this because Egypt has narrower interests, but Egypt is, in fact, once again flirting with abandoning the Camp David Accords, apparently. That is talking to Turkey, to Saudi Arabia, about actions to curb Israeli expansion through cooperative means. I think what we're seeing is the end of the American created security architecture and order in the entire West Asian, North African region. And so this is really quite something. The fact that it's happening slowly, doesn't mean it isn't happening. And it recalls the Hemingway phrase everybody now uses, that when someone was asked how he went bankrupt, he said, gradually and then suddenly. Mm-hmm. So we're moving towards some move that we can't predict, that will bring down the order that existed before February 28th.
Do you think, Ambassador, the new security pact we talked about it in the initial hours of the announcement of the military pact, they call it defense pact or security pact between Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey. This could be the first step, of what Israel was talking about. They're talking about the Sunni axis as, contrary to the axis of resistance. What is that when it comes to the eyes of Israel? How do they see these sort of new changes that are happening?
I think they're very disturbed by it. I think if they do consider this a Sunni axis, they're mistaken. I think the days when Sunni Shia differences were the defining dynamic in the region are past. Everybody in the region is now following national interest, not religious theology or ideology. That is true in Iran too, by the way. The Islamic Republic is more of a republic and less Islamic now than it was. I think this is driven by national interest, not by theology, not by religious differences. And it should be no comfort to Israel, because basically the source of instability in the region, everybody now recognizes, is Israel. It's Israeli behavior, Israeli genocide in Gaza, Israeli pogroms and ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon, Israeli exercise of military hegemony over Syria, in opposition to Turkish influence, Israeli efforts to keep the United States at war with Iran. And, it's very interesting. One of the things that is now mentioned is that David Barnea, who was the head of Mossad, who was in the meeting with Netanyahu in this sit room, I think he was there electronically, not physically, basically told Donald Trump this war would be over in a weekend. The original objective included regime change. Well, that didn't happen, and it was always a ridiculous notion. And apparently the American intelligence and military establishment both told Donald Trump that this wouldn't work, but he went ahead anyway. And now we hear, and this is a joke really, that he has issued an executive order canceling the electromagnetic catapult system on U.S. aircraft carriers, which the Navy has spent billions of dollars and years trying to develop. They haven't entirely succeeded. The Chinese now have such a system aboard their latest aircraft carrier. The United States does not. Donald Trump, I guess, is a mechanical engineer. You would probably flunk him if he had joined one of your classes. But he has decided that steam catapults are the thing. So we're going back to the 1920s and 30s, not forward into the 21st century. And from an engineering point of view, and from the Navy's point of view, this is ridiculous. It's an absurdity. The electromagnetic system is more efficient. You can launch more aircraft more quickly. It is cheaper. It is more reliable. It has fewer moving parts. And here we have it. This is the behavior of someone who is a dictator, doesn't listen to people, and imagines that he knows more than experts about everything, including apparently mechanical engineering.
Yesterday, there was a meeting with the foreign minister of Turkey together with the Egyptian counterpart, and in which he said, aftermath, he said that they're going to do something radical when it comes to the second phase of that plan of the Board of Peace, as Donald Trump's Board of Peace for the Gaza, which we know 15-point plan document. That document, Israel said, we're not going to abide by that document. We're not going to withdraw. We're not going to, do anything in Gaza. Basically, that yellow line going to stay there, and we're going to stay behind that yellow line. But here is what the Turkish foreign minister said, that it's no longer possible to ignore the fact that Netanyahu is increasingly condemning Israel to international isolation. This pressure must be increased immediately, and Netanyahu must comply. And these crazy projects must be abandoned. Israel aimed to expel the Palestinians from Gaza, and if possible, leave no Palestine there. And he says, when we join the Board of Peace together with Egypt and other countries, we aim to prevent this plan through diplomacy and peace. In the first stage, the goal was to stop genocide. And thankfully, together we succeeded in this, and we have stopped the genocide, and to a certain extent. And later on, he says that despite the Palestinian side fulfilling its commitments regarding the transition to the second phase, Israel's failure to take any further step could push us and other mediators to jointly take a radical step. What does that mean, and what comes to your mind when he talks this way?
Well, I really have no idea what it means, but one thing it may very well mean is abandoning the Board of Peace completely, basically separating everyone from it. I mean, the thing is a farce anyway. It is ridiculous. And there's a very defensive tone to what the Turkish foreign minister said. We joined this because we wanted to end the genocide. Well, to a certain extent, we've succeeded. But the genocide is actually continuing. It's just on a slower basis. And the outrages that the Israelis are perpetrating have not stopped at all on any front. In fact, Israel is indeed, as he said, isolating itself internationally. And I guess, the implication of what he said is that Turkey and Egypt will take action, maybe through the organization of the Islamic Conference or Cooperation, Islamic Cooperation, or some other means to further isolate Israel. So we'll see. But it's clear that Israeli behavior has become intolerable to virtually everyone.